Okay, hello again, everyone. We are switching to the second session, which is on experimental design. Of course, I want to just point on few things. Let me just maybe share my screen first. So why are bringing this issue? First of all, I think you are already familiar with the, let me maybe do it this way. So you are familiar with experimental design, and I just want to mention a few things related to it because to the ethics committee, as ethics committee, we are receiving applications, and many of them are based on experimental design, and we see some methodological issues that we wanted to comment in general, yeah, to everyone. So first of all, brief overview, yeah. So experimental design is usually used when we are looking or we are exploring the relationship between variables. So there is a dependent variable and independent variable. For example, here on this screen, you can see the employment as a dependent, finding work, yeah, finding employment as a dependent variable. And there is an intervention, certain intervention, which is independent variable, yeah, X. So this one can be, let's say, a university can conduct a seminar on how to write CV. So that's, let's say, X, the independent variable. And how having this course, going through this CV writing course, will affect employment of our graduates. That's very simple hypothesis, let's say. So what if we had to conduct, of course, conducting experiment will be the best for this kind of, or to test this kind of hypothesis. We will say going through CV writing course will increase the chances of finding employment after graduation. So this is very simple hypothesis, and we conduct experiment to test it. So true experiment. So experiments, we have different types of experiments. Yeah, basically true experiments, and we have randomized experiments. We have quasi experiments. Quasi experiments is a general name for all types of experiments which are not true experiment. Basic true experiment, we find some people. Let's say in our case, we find fourth-year students. Let's say, first of all, one maybe requirement for experiment and hypothesis testing, it's good to have 30 at each group. So let's say the minimum, I would say, we should find some kind of maybe 60 people, yeah, or even more. The more the better, the more the merrier. Not of course thousands, but let's say 100, 120, it's better. Then we split them into two groups. One is a control group, the other one is experimental group. Yeah, experimental group will receive certain treatment, or we call it intervention, treatment, manipulation. There are different names for that. So in our case, they will undergo the CV writing course. The control group, nothing. Yeah, they just study as usual, nothing. And second very important part of this group, when we find, let's say, 60 people and we are dividing them into groups of 30, this distribution into groups should be random. For the experiment to be true, it should be random distribution into two groups. And after we applied a treatment or intervention, we measure the results. Yeah, we see that statistically significant, yeah, so that more people in the experimental group found employment in a short time after graduation compared to the control group. And the difference is statistically significant. Yeah, so that's how we measure. Usually we use t-test. For example, 30 people after graduation in 1 month period, let's say 25 found employment, and here it's only, let's say, 15 people got to work in 1 month after graduation. So the means are different, numbers are different, whether this difference is statistically significant. So that's we measure using t-test, or if there are many groups, we use ANOVA. So this is more related to statistics, yeah? So what we are seeing now in our applications, we receive applications where we have maybe 40 people. So researchers conducting experiments with a fewer number of children at schools. And normally the distribution is not random, but based on the classes at school. So A class, B class, for example. A class is going through certain intervention, B class control group, and then results are measured. In terms of ethics, of course, we look at the consent, whether if it's, let's say, at school or at university, if as students, or let's say at school, these are again school students, yeah, whether consent is obtained. When consent form is there, procedures are well written. At school, it's consent from parents. At university, it's consent from students. Then it should be voluntarily, fully voluntarily. People should always have a chance to opt out from the participating in the experiment. So that's from ethical perspective. But there is another one, methodologically. Let's say you are dividing groups into two by classes. Our education faculty, let's say PhD students going to school, and they have internships there, so they have access to teachers, to classes. So A class, B class. The problem here, also, it's ethical and methodological problem, both of them. If you agree with teachers, teachers may make students to participate, yeah? Like for school students, very difficult to opt out from the full class. Like, let's say there are 20 people in a class. By the way, 20 is not maybe enough for statistical tests, especially t-tests and others, parametric tests. It's very difficult to opt out. That's one thing, more ethical thing. Second one, also regarding the ethics, the A class, which is experimental class, will receive some kind of better education. For example, if you are applying some intervention and you receive a better treatment, I would say. I hope usually researchers do something to improve, yeah? So A class, just because the person, a student in A class receives better education or some additional training, whatever, just because he or she is in A class. But a person in B, because just in B class, he or she in the B class, kind of deprived from that opportunity, cannot kind of take advantage of that opportunity. So we are creating some kind of inequality on the class and the school level. That's another ethical consideration that should be, I mean, taken into account. It's ethical. It's ethical. From methodological point of view, if we are not randomly distributing this into like the whole population, not randomly distributing into groups, experimental and control groups, then another problem may arise. At certain schools, A class usually consists of students with a better academic performance, and B class consists of students with a, I mean, lower academic performance. Even though if school does not implement this kind of policy, usually groups of kids, or even at university level, maybe you have noticed that yourself, as some of you are like teaching, groups of students have different dynamics. Of course, here at SDU now we are following the credit system, but before, like when students were divided into groups, they have their own dynamics. Certain like relationship between students, certain attitudes as a group of people, and this may affect the quality of the experiment. So a true experiment is best conducted when there is enough people, let's say at least 30, but it's at least 30 in each group, when distribution happens randomly, yeah. So this is the best outcome in terms of methodology. In terms of ethics, I already mentioned, yeah. So we should avoid creating inequality. We should avoid involuntary participation. So it should be fully voluntarily, yeah. And these things should be taken into consideration. These things should be taken into consideration. Another thing, like even it's a methodological issue. For example, you have conducted experiment, 20 people here, 20 people here, maybe not enough for parametric statistical test like t-test or ANOVA. You have written some conclusions. Ethically speaking, you should write limitations, and author should not generalize, make some kind of generalization based on that conclusion, because number of people is limited, because, for example, there were classes, it wasn't random distribution. In a conclusion, when we provide some recommendations, in conclusion part, we should always write limitation of the research, that results of this research cannot be generalized due to these reasons. There was no random distribution, the number of, let's say, students was limited in groups, and other things. It should be, I would say, sincerely, frankly mentioned there in the conclusion part. So this at least yeah, there is a problem, and we should openly state about this problem in our conclusion part when we talk about limitations. That's very important. Of course, in terms of methodology, when we have less than 30 people in each group, we still can continue with experiment, but then we have to use other tests, non-parametric tests like, I don't know, UMetNI and others. There are some other non-parametric tests with when n number of observations is less than 30. So this is more methodological technical issue, I would say. But in general, we recommend, as ethics committee, our recommendation for those who have already started or experiments, or who are thinking of doing experiments, of conducting experiments, please try to avoid conducting experiments on groups which are distributed outside of the project. Not for the purpose of project, but let's say as a class, the school distributes students into A, B, C classes, or I don't know, students select certain groups at university level. So if distribution happens outside of control of the researcher, this won't be true experiment. It already goes into quasi-experimental part. The research is not under control. And again, using these groups for experiment, it's not advised, because I mean, it's outside of your control, and there might be other considerations, issues when school, university, whoever distributed them into such groups. Biggest thing, it's very difficult for those students to opt out, not to participate in the research, because the whole groups participates because let's say research agrees with teacher, whatever, even though they sign, and it's strongly advised not to do that. The best way to do is, I mean, have a control, maybe provide some incentives and do experiments outside of curriculum. Let's say CV writing. Let's say SDU does not provide CV writing courses, for example. Then you invite people, say register, maybe provide some, I don't know, lottery or whatever prizes, chocolates for participants, and say like, you please register. If you register, you will be distributed randomly into two groups. The lucky one will receive CV writing, the not unlucky one, but some of you will go to just control group, but you will receive a chocolate, and then conduct it outside the curriculum. That's the best. That's the best ideal standard. If you cannot do that, I mean, you will go through research ethics committee. I mean, anyway, you will go to, I mean, in most cases, if it's students, school, and others, you will go research ethics committee, and the benefits of research should be exceeding those costs and considerations that we were talking about. Yeah, so that's about experiments. What that I wanted to share with you, and on behalf of Research Ethics Committee. Any questions? Oh, thank you, Tibik. Don't forget about certain emotions. Yeah. I can see your faces, but press some buttons, guys. Oh, thank you. Yeah, please, Madina.
Yes, thank you again very much for the information. But the question is the following. If we cannot choose the groups of the students for the research and control, for the control and experimental group, which are not divided by us, but the experiment, for example, lasts for 1 semester, for example, or for 1 term. We are, so for example, at SDU, usually groups are divided by random sampling. Like we can say that it's random sampling, right? So what if we compare, I don't know, there are any tests and choose the ones which are suitable, which have the same level. Is this, can this be a way out? Like, I mean, because in practice, it's like very difficult to organize what you mentioned. Am I right, or am I not? Like, could I
Experiments are
explain
very
it properly?
difficult. Yeah, I got it. I got it. Normally, yes, in practice, experiments are very difficult to conduct. That's for sure. So it's usually advised to conduct experiments when you have some outside funding for incentives and some better resources, I would say. Second, like in terms of random selection of students, of course, here we have credit systems. Students themselves are divided into groups. Even there is one class or one course, and there are 2 different sections, for example, and students select themselves those sections. But here, it's not exactly random. Let's say you might have a course which students from, let's say, mathematics, or let's say student from biology, from 2 foreign languages can apply, and usually one section will be full of, let's say, biology or some other students. The other one will be 2 foreign language students. Why? Because of these schedules of other classes. Yeah, when they are registering for the course, they will consider these schedules, especially if it's elective course. That's one issue. The other issue, another issue is what I was talking about is a voluntarily participation. Yeah, it's very difficult to opt out when it's part of your curriculum. That's why experimental design is advised when you have resources. Resources in terms of, let's say, monetary, resources in terms of people, and in terms of, let's say, before COVID, when I was in Cambodia as a provost, with one researcher, we have conducted, with a member of academic staff, we have conducted research on blended learning, online blended learning. So we selected one Coursera course, and at university level, we had general electives, 3 credits each semester. The students may have, of any departments, should select from other university departments courses. So we introduced 1 credit course as a university, which counts toward that general electives, but students participation is totally, students can always select other courses, but they can also select this 1 credit course. We created this course completely based on the Coursera, divided into 3 groups. One group was taking completely online. The second group was having a meeting with a lecturer once a week. The third group had a meeting with lecturer once in 2 weeks. And then we measured the performance at the end. So between second and third groups, there was not much significant difference, but between second, third, and first group, like the first group, which is totally online, they have shown like higher dropout rates and they have shown lower academic performance. That's normally all research says about that, but we have just conducted ourselves to see it in the context, let's say, in Cambodia and that particular private university. But yeah, we had resources, we had power to introduce this course, yeah, let's say. And we had a system which allows it, this one credit course. So in here, I mean, experiments are difficult to conduct. So if it's very important one, it's better to discuss with faculty, with the head of departments, with the dean, if it's university level, or with a, let's say, alumni office, if it's CV writing course, and introduce it as part of the university. And most importantly, it should be, if it's research, it should be voluntarily, like student receive something, or I don't know, some lottery and others.
Okay, thank you, clear.
You're welcome. Okay, then if no other questions, thank you very much for your attention, for being so, Madina, like special thanks for you. Yeah, if not for you, like, yeah.
You're always welcome. It was my great pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, see you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, take care.